Hello and welcome back to Rev Real Estate School. I'm your host, Michael Montgomery, and we're joined by Jess today. Jess, how you doing?
Good. How are you, Mike?
Good. Well, we're smiling a little bit right now simply because of our topic today, which is the wildest or weirdest things that we've seen in real estate. And some of these things we've seen and some of these things we've heard. And I think there's some important takeaways for some of these, but also some of them are just interesting and funny. There's just some interesting people out there in the world that do some pretty crazy things. So that's what we wanted to get into. And I'm sure everybody has their own stories. One thing that I've told myself I need to do is have like a little book and like write these stories down so that I don't forget them, because there's so many times where I'm like driving home from a showing, I'm like, oh, I need to remember that. And then, 3 days later you forget it. But it was fun working on this, I would say, trying to go through my memory and think through some of these weird situations that we've encountered. So
and we almost like normalize it, right? Like you stop noticing the hoarders and, the underwear on the ground and the naked people that you walk in on. It like sort of becomes normal.
That's actually so true, right? Like in going through this, I'm like, so many hoarders that you and I have both seen, but like, that's just kind of normal now. Like it's not normal, but it's just like, it's normal as part of our career that you're going to encounter hoarders. In fact, even to kick things off, I bought a house from a hoarder. And when this was my first rental property, and the closing was delayed because she couldn't get all of her stuff out. And she was there for the showing when I went through. She was the seller, I was the buyer. And she was like, she met us at the door and she was like, oh, just so you know, it's a little untidy right now, but don't worry, it'll get all cleaned up. She was the nicest lady. I walked in and there was just this small little path that you could walk through the house, a small little path. And then other than that, boxes like to the top. And I looked at inside some of these, but I didn't actually open them, but they were open. And they were just the weirdest things. Like I remember seeing, she had all of her like craft peanut butter jars, plastic peanut butter jars saved. And she had boxes upon boxes of these. It was just, it was crazy. But yeah, in many cases, actually, I sold another hoarder house recently too, but like you feel for these people too, right? Because they can't see it. They just see it as being slightly untidy. And so of course there's mental health at play there too. But I think that we see that a lot in real estate. So that's one that I don't think we have a lot of hoarder related stories, but we do definitely see things like that. But why don't we start with one of yours?
Okay. Well, when you were telling me about the closing day, it reminded me of the situation we had at the company you and I both worked at, where we had bought and closed on a house. And I don't know if you were there or not for this one. Were you?
I remember this.
Oh, it was so bizarre. There was a cat stuck between the walls in the house.
Yeah. I remember that. Did they discover that at the walkthrough, or was that after possession?
I think it was after possession, or maybe it was during the walkthrough. I can't remember now. But we had to send over one of our guys to basically like take the wall apart, maybe, and get this cat out. And I don't know how the cat got in between the walls, but the seller was worried because they had lost their cat and it was cold and they didn't know where the cat was. And the buyers, of course, didn't want to deal with what could be like a carcass eventually in their walls. Making these weird noises coming from the walls. They couldn't figure out what it was. And somehow this cat had squeezed in.
That's crazy. And like,
did you sell that house?
No. I just remember hearing the story when I remember one agent brought it to everyone's attention and I was like, there's no way a seller could leave a cat and A, leave a cat, B, leave a cat in the wall, which I mean, the cat could have found its way in there, but as a seller, aren't you leaving and being like, I wonder where my cat is? Or you're just like, you're just leaving and being like, oh, it'll find its way to my next house, wherever that might be.
It was so
the cat
wild.
was alive. Like so the cat survived. And if it was like a long vacant possession or something like that, it may not have. So good story at the end.
Reminds me also of my friend actually was doing these showings and sent me photos a few weeks ago. And there were raccoons stuck between these two window panes between this house and the next house, because they were like detached houses, but the windows were super close to each other. And there were literal raccoons like up against the window staring at her. These are the things that...
Oh, that would creep me out more than anything. Yeah. You don't see a raccoon close up very frequently.
No.
Speaking on terms of closings, this is the weirdest thing I saw on a closing. And this wasn't that long ago. And it was more funny than anything. But we went through and we did our final walkthrough. This was basically the day of possession. House was like immaculately clean, like just the perfect walkthrough. You walk in, everything's been completely scrubbed down. The buyers were super excited. And we were going through the home, and then we went into one of the bedrooms. And on the bedroom floor, there was a little child's toy sitting there. And I remember looking at it and being like, holy smokes, like you clean the whole house, but you leave this one little child's toy. Like what's going on? So I went up and grabbed it, and I was like, oh, I'll get rid of this. And I thought it was like a little kid's baseball bat. And if anyone's starting to picture what this may or may not be in a bedroom, wherever your mind's going, you're probably right. And it was a sex toy that was left there, like right in the middle of the primary bedroom. And I didn't know it. That was the crazy thing. I didn't know what this thing was, but my client said, you probably don't want to touch that. You probably don't want to pick that up. I'm like, well, I'll just get rid of it for you. I thought she was like, oh, she'll get rid of it. But she was like, don't touch that. And I was like, well, I'll just throw it away. She's like, do you know what it is? And I'm like, it's like a little kid's toy or something. She's like, no, it's not a kid's toy. Kids don't go anywhere near that. And anyways, I sent a,
touched it.
I know. There was, thank goodness I have a ton of hand sanitizer in my car to bathe myself in afterwards. But the listing agent was a really nice lady, and I sent her a photo just kind of jokingly, but I said, please don't tell your seller, because it was like a really smooth transaction. I didn't want them to feel like ashamed of accidentally leaving that, but had a good laugh over that one.
One last hurrah before closing.
Yeah, exactly. It was so funny. And actually, on another closing note, one of my broker friends, we were discussing just some interesting clauses that we've seen in contracts, and he said, well, one of the most interesting ones he saw recently was, and this is kind of cute actually, that in the terms of the contract, the seller had to bake and leave a fresh apple pie for the buyer. And that was drafted right into the contract. And he and I both kind of, we laughed at it, but I think it's just kind of a cutesy thing. Like maybe they had an apple pie that was being baked during the showing or something like that. And so they drafted that into the contract. Who knows? But I thought that was kind of that was a cute way of approaching a closing.
I like that he stipulated it had to be handmade. I would have gone to some grocery store and popped a pie right on into that oven.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. I've fulfilled my contractual duties.
That's so funny. Oh man.
Let's go to your next one.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll take things on a more sinister note. We'll turn the page here. Probably mine. And, this is actually like a pretty serious topic. I know we are laughing, but I think safety in real estate is so important. And, when you and I were chatting about our experiences, like they're clearly different. And it really is for a lot of women more of a concern than men, right? And I remember way back when I was working for a real estate brokerage that was located on King Street West, which any of our listeners in Toronto will know the area very, very well. So King and Bathurst used to be this travel lodge, an actual motel. I'm really dating myself here. Now it's all condos and buildings, but we had this office right next door. And one day a guy came in and he asked for me. And he said, I need a place to live. I'm looking for a rental. I just broke up with my wife. I need basically a place to sort of land as I'm going through this divorce. Then I'm going to buy something. I said, okay. So we set up some showings. I had some weird vibes from him. Like I'm a pretty intuitive person, as you know, and I didn't feel 100% right, but I went with it. And I took him on these viewings. We got in my car, drove him down the street to this condo hotel building. And again, just felt off, creepy. Didn't feel right. So I did the things you're supposed to do, which who knows if it would actually be helpful in a really dangerous situation. But, I'd let him go in front of me into the condo. I kept my back to the door and I kept myself closest to the door, kind of let him conduct the tour. And I managed to sort of not get too physically close to him because I just felt strange about the way he was talking and things he was doing. I felt really uncomfortable. So I decided to Google him. I got back to my office. I escaped the situation. I sort of put him off and said, listen, we'll be in touch. We'll do some more showings another time. And then I Googled him. And I'm a bit of a detective, if you don't know. So I'm like typing away on my keyboard, trying to find out everything I can about this guy. And turns out he was a felon who had escaped from jail. And he was in jail for domestic assault, sexual assault, battery. And I was obviously beside myself because I'm thinking to myself, like, here I was targeted by this guy. Yeah. So I phoned the police. The police came over and interviewed me. Luckily, he was staying at this travel lodge. So the police set up this sting operation. It was a literal battering ram. They pushed right into his door to try to catch him. And he was gone by the next day. So
that's so crazy. That's so crazy. Yeah, that's unbelievable. And you could pick up on it when you were showing it. You could pick up on something was a little off about him.
Yeah, and I've had a lot of those situations. Like, I think it's a different time now. Like, we're just kind of out there on social media. But back when I started in real estate, you had a choice to either put your picture on your business card or not. And I chose to. And I was on some billboards for the previous brokerage that I worked at. And I think like people target like young women a lot of the time, right? And so I'd get weird phone calls and I'd get people, you know, trying to date me instead of actually buy properties. And I think as a woman, you have to really learn to lean into your intuitions and decide, like, is this client an actual client? Are they here for the right reasons? And I would set up certain safety protocols for myself. I would always leave notes about who I was going to showings with and information. I kept a day timer back in the day before you had everything in your computer or your calendar. And I would especially leave notes, like for my husband now, he was my boyfriend at the time, like where I was going, who I was meeting, and he would call and check in a lot of the times. These are important steps that you have to take just to keep yourself safe. And it's changed now. I think there's some apps out there that women can use, or men too, if they're feeling unsafe, to log their whereabouts and have special check-in times. And if you don't, the police are alerted or your circle is alerted to make sure that someone comes and finds you. Because a lot of the time we're in empty houses at nighttime or when there's nobody around, and we can be in very unsafe scenarios.
It's so true. It's so true. You know where my mind's going with this too is just like, it's same thing with like a car accident. You never think it's really going to happen to you until it does. So there's these safety protocols that a lot of times I think we think, oh, well, you know, this person seems all right, or this seems okay. And not having these safety protocols in place can mean very, very serious outcomes. And we've heard these terrible stories of these things going south, and we have the tools that are available to us. I think men and women, but especially women that are being targeted potentially by predators. And because the other thing is, like, we're so out there in the public face, right? Like, our information is very easily discoverable. Our faces, make fun of it or not, but real estate agent faces are on everything. So it makes us a pretty big target, doesn't it?
It really does. And I always tell like younger agents, follow your gut. Like, it's not worth it. It never is. Yeah. You know, if you feel weird about someone, follow that intuition. And it doesn't matter how long you've been in the industry. I was just chatting with one of my friends the other day. She's been a real estate agent for 15 years. It just happened to her a couple of days ago that she was targeted by a person who requested to see a vacant property and then tried something. She escaped. Luckily, she was able to contact the building security, and the police were there, and she was safe. But these things happen to even seasoned agents, right? We get tricked by people, or we're put in situations where we think, well, I feel weird about this, but I'll just do the quick showing. And it's not our fault. There's criminals out there that target us.
Totally. And you know, some of this, like Googling somebody is a perfect step, but there's also open houses, right? Where we're hosting an open house. The door is wide open for anybody to come in. We can be sitting in a vacant house. Somebody can roll in, you know, at 2 minutes before the open house closes and just be like, hey, can I just have a quick tour? And there's been cases of this happening, and it's devastating, really. So I think that showings are one thing, and then just any time where we're out there or even doing listing presentations too, going into homes. There's been cases where like tenants are selling the home on behalf of the owner. They're not doing it rightfully so, but they're saying that they're the owner, and you're coming over there as an agent ready to list a home. And I think also as agents, because we're 100% commission, it's difficult for us, maybe if we're on the newer side, to walk away from a potential client, but it's never worth it. Like, it's never worth it. Even if you get those spidey senses and that person's not somebody who's malicious, a lot of times listening to that can also just mean avoiding a nightmare client. Even if that person was not going to do anything that was going to be harmful, that person could still be a nightmare client. If you're getting that feeling, nothing's worth it. There's no commission check in the world that's worth it.
No.
Yeah.
Save yourself.
Yeah. I had a case. It wasn't similar to this. It was a little different, but I was showing a vacant house. This was probably like 6 years ago. This big vacant house, like this big, massive kind of luxury style vacant house. I was going through with my clients, and we went through all the rooms. All seemed pretty legitimate. It was just a normal vacant house. Then we went down to the basement, and there was one room that we couldn't open the door. And so I gave it a good reef and kind of pushed on it a little bit. And finally it opened. And what came out of that room was a whole family of non-English speaking people, and I'm talking like, I don't know if it was a family, it was probably 8 people. They couldn't communicate with me. They seemed extremely frightened, like extremely frightened, because emotion, you don't have to be able to speak English for me to pick up on emotion.
Yeah.
And they seemed extremely scared. And it wasn't like they were living in any sort of like filth or anything in there, but it was just like mattresses all across the floor where it was like a whole family was sleeping. Anyways, like following that, I did reach out to the police about it, because I was like, who knows what could be happening there, whether it be they didn't seem like squatters per se, but who knows what could have been happening out of that room. But there are these cases where even when we see things like that, I think as real estate agents, sometimes we're like, oh, that was weird, and then we shut it off and move away. But I think there's times where if we see certain things, I mean, we'd probably want to look into what the rules are with reporting things. But if something's off, we got to talk to somebody about it. Don't just harbor it. If something feels weird in a listing when you're showing it, I mean, I've seen some weird stuff in listings as far as like naked people, drugs, like you would not imagine, people using them, people leaving them everywhere. So I've like seen a lot of that sort of stuff. But when you get like these feelings like something's off here, you got to report that. You got to report it.
You did the right thing.
Yeah, it's just a strange case. It's just, especially because there was no ability to communicate with them. And it was just like the only communication that was done was basically by way of seeing their facial expressions, which they were like terrified to see me, which makes me feel like there was something definitely wrong there.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like human trafficking for sure.
Yeah. Something along those lines. Yeah. On the, kind of along the same lines, but probably a little bit more playful is, one lady that we have in our market that almost everybody knows. Everybody knows this name. Her name's Freeda, and she's very well.
Freeda, if you're listening.
Yeah, she might be, because she's very interested in real estate, which you'll find out here. So she's been in our market for a number of years as a potential buyer or seller. And she kind of goes on these rampages where she calls agents with listings, and she'll just call them. She actually starts the conversation, because I've talked to her a couple of times. She starts the conversation like she's pretty normal, pretty polite. And she says she usually says she has like 6 to 8 properties to sell. And then she wants to potentially buy your listing. So your ears tend to perk up when you hear that. And then she turns a corner and she starts going off the rails and yelling, screaming, and then she starts swearing at agents and just bad mouthing real estate agents like you would not believe. Like she just has a complete and utter hatred. But it's this weird little like change that occurs in the conversation where she starts off kind of polite, and then something like triggered in her mind, and then she just turns into like absolutely hating real estate. But the things she says are just like, they're so aggressive, and you can tell by her voice that she's quite elderly. You can tell by her voice that she seems like an elderly lady. And I've gotten a few voicemails. So sometimes, of course, you're not picking up the phone. It goes to voicemail, and she leaves these long, rambling, like 5-minute voicemails, just swearing at you, telling you how bad you are at everything that you do and how every real estate agent is this biggest crook. Everyone knows about her in our market. And, she's been reported to the police multiple times, but the police are just like, she's not really doing anything wrong here. Like, she's not really harassing you. She's making an annoying phone call, but then she's not continuing. I think there's got to be something.
Yeah.
There's got to be some rule against that, right? There's got to be something in some law book somewhere. But she doesn't like target one agent. She just goes to the whole real estate agent industry. And it's kind of funny because like on our public forums of agents, once she starts striking, agents will say, oh, Freeda's back, because she goes through these periods of time where she's just like silent, and then out of nowhere she takes off, and some agents will like share the exact wording. And it's, I remember the first time I had a call with her, I didn't know who she was. And I was just like, I was almost devastated after the call. It was just like getting punched in the gut. You're just like, holy, did I do something? Because you think to yourself, you're like, did I say something wrong? Did I upset this lady? And I think as real estate agents, probably a takeaway here is like this is what I oftentimes say to newer agents too. Like most people are good people, but there's a couple of bad ones that will just completely drag your career down. And we have to just be willing to separate ourselves from people like that. And I know that she's definitely not a traditional person in many ways. Like there's something off with her, but we still just have to distance ourselves from that sort of thing.
Yeah, you do. You have to just deal with like the shit.
Yeah, exactly. Tell me about Lawton Boulevard.
Okay, before I tell you that, when you were talking about this and I was thinking about how crappy she was, it reminded me of I used to work in sales centers and I would sell pre-construction condos. So we'd have these beautiful models basically built into our sales centers of a condo, but it's not real. Like the water doesn't work. It's not an actual real place. In every single condo sales room I ever worked in, somebody used the toilet, and it was usually a number 2, and it was not a toilet with plumbing.
Oh my gosh. Like, do you not open it and see there's no water in the bowl?
Right? We'd have to wrap the toilets and put signs up like, this is not a working toilet.
Oh my gosh. I haven't thought of that, but I mean, I guess if you're working in a sales center, you probably do have to deal with that.
Every time.
Always.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so funny. There's multiple stories, of people using the washroom when the water's turned off in homes, right?
Yeah.
And then just walking away, this is the same thing, but significantly worse probably because water's probably not even hooked up. You're probably taking the toilet out and putting a new toilet in. That's probably your only solution.
Brand new toilet.
Holy smokes. Oh man, that's funny. All right, Lawton Boulevard.
Lawton Boulevard. Okay, so Lawton Boulevard in Toronto, for our Toronto listeners, is this really nice street, full of lots of high-end homes, and it's a really, really upscale neighborhood near Yonge and St. Clair. So one time I had a guy call me and he said, I've picked you because I have a property on Lawton Boulevard and that's your last name. It has to be. Like, you have to be my agent. And I was like, sweet. Okay. Why not? So I went there, but again, I felt a little off in the phone call. I felt like the way I was chosen it made sense to me, but some of the way he was talking and some of the stories he was explaining about the home, like it was his parents, but he was in charge of it, but he didn't live there, but he was the one to be making the decisions. It just felt a little weird. So being the safety police that I am, I enlisted my best friend to come and pretend to be my assistant. I would do this sometimes. If I ever felt uncomfortable, I would bring some along to be my assistant. I figure if there's 2 of us, maybe we could fend off the person if things got strange. So anyway, we show up and he had said, listen, I'm either going to sell it or rent it for my parents. I don't know what, but I need you to price for both. Fine. So we came to the house and he started doing the tour. And in the dining room was a big table set up with chairs and just a bunch of dead dolls. And I say dead because they were like decapitated. Their heads were not attached to their bodies. It was a table of dolls. Am I in a horror movie? And the way he presented the house to me and showed me this room, it was like he was proud of the situation and he was maybe waiting for my reaction. And I'm thinking, dude, this is how horror movies start, right? I could just hear the music playing in the background. And then he says, well, I have to show you girls the laundry room. It's in the back of the house and it's not attached. Now, this isn't super uncommon in really old homes in Toronto that you'd have a separate entrance to get into the basement, basically. So you have to leave the back door and then go down a separate one. Maybe you have similar things in Calgary. But here he is with a padlock unlocking the back basement, garage, whatever the heck it was back there where the laundry was. And now I'm thinking, well, now we're hooped. He's going to lock us in here and that'll be the end of that. So he opens it and we're like, no, go first. He descends down into this room. It's like a dirt floor. Lo and behold, there actually were laundry machines there. It was a laundry room. And we somehow made it out of there alive. And I guess the funniest part of all of this is I took the listing.
Yeah. It was a successful transaction. So he maybe had some weird interests in some way, shape, or form, but the deal actually went smoothly, and he was a normal enough guy outside of certain elements.
Yeah, I mean, the deal ended up being okay. I never went to the house alone. I asked him to clear off the dolls before we started showings because I told him it would be intimidating or strange for buying. Gave him this list. But I think he was just one of these, kind of eccentric people who had his own way of living and doing things. I don't know, dude, it was super creepy.
That is, and it's a staging tip. Remove all dolls' heads from dining room table. Did he say what the dolls' heads were for?
No.
It was just his collection?
He acted like it was normal and kind of made excuses about it. Oh, these are, I'll just get rid of this stuff. But why are they even there? There were no kids. He didn't have kids.
Well, and dolls are creepy enough, but then you remove their head and they become 20x creepy.
Yeah. So why is there a collection of them? I don't even want to know.
I love that you took the business though and closed the deal. But you bring up an interesting point here. I think from a safety perspective, this is something that I haven't heard of before, but is probably a really good strategy. Is if you're getting that feeling, like bring along another agent as like your quote unquote assistant or team or something like that.
Yep.
Just two people is always better than one in these cases.
I would do that all the time. And sometimes the truth would come out. Like I'd actually say, oh, I'm going to bring my real estate partner, and I bring my boyfriend, who's now my husband. Oh, all of a sudden the showing got canceled. So as soon as, yeah, that happened to me a lot too. So
really interesting. So you say your real estate partner and you say he's also your husband?
Sometimes I would, or sometimes I would just say my real estate partner. But as soon as I said he or explained that there was a man coming along, it was like, that was canceled. It happened to me a few times actually, but my now husband always used to say to me, because a lot of times people will come up to you and you'll chat with them. I mean, I was always taught, and I still teach this way, like you need to talk to people about real estate, tell them what you do for a living, like make it known. So here I would be in clubs, in bars, getting drinks, chatting with everybody I could, including dudes, about real estate. And, a lot of these people don't always have intentions of actually being your clients, right? And so here I was trying to do what I was trained to do, which is always try to sell. And my husband has this thing where he's like, if you ever meet somebody in a bar or club, they're almost never going to transact.
That's a good rule to live by. Yeah, that's true. I met my now wife at a bar talking about real estate because we were both in real estate, and that's what led to that's what like sparked the initial conversation. But yeah, I would say that's probably not your best networking opportunity.
No.
If you have to like rate them on a scale, finding potential buyers intoxicated at bars probably isn't your best spot. Might be more fun, but it might not be the best. Oh, that's funny. So I had this story of, and this is actually, I think this human is absolutely genius, and it's another elderly lady story. And I don't know if I don't know if this was my market or another market, but I remember hearing this story and being blown away by just the sheer intelligence of this elderly lady. So this is what. And she did this, I think, for quite a while, but she would call up a realtor and she would say, I'd love to see your listing. And, but she says, but I don't drive. So the realtor said, no problem. I'll come pick you up and we'll go have a look at the listing. And so realtor would go pick her up, of course. They'd have a little chat. They'd go over to the house. They'd go and show the home, and she'd show a fair amount of interest, being like, this is beautiful. She'd have feedback for the realtor too. She'd be like really looking like she was a real bona fide buyer. And then she said, okay, I'll think it through. And then she'd get back into the car with the agent, and she'd say, oh, by the way, I just have to run a quick appointment. I got to go to the doctor's office. Can you drop me off there? And the realtor would do it. And then it came out that she was doing this multiple times. This same lady would call realtors, get them to take them to her listing, and then get the realtor to drop her off at her appointment or like at the grocery store or something like that. So she was using realtors for car rides. How crazy is that? Yeah. And I like, you can't falter, because I'm just like, that's so smart. Like if she wasn't able to drive, maybe she wanted to save the Uber or cab fare.
Yep.
And so she'd get a ride one way from the group of people that would be very happily put you in the car and drive you. And she was just a normal lady, but she did this multiple times until the market started to pick up on the fact that she was doing this. And I don't know whatever came of it, but I would just, if I ever met her, I'd shake her hand and be like, genius move. Like,
here's a gift card for Uber just for you. Yeah.
There's gift cards. You don't get my business card, but you do get. I'll give you business, or give you gift cards to Uber for that purpose. But I just thought that was a pretty smart move.
That's wild. She's got guts, that lady.
She's got some guts. Yeah. Let's move on to your next one, your milk jug story.
Oh man. Okay, so we're talking about like sketchy clients or sketchy situations. But sometimes real estate agents do sketchy stuff too. And you remember this, it happened in BC recently. This real estate agent was caught on camera chugging from a gallon of milk in his client's fridge.
It's crazy. Yeah. And there's images, like if you were to Google it and find it, you can see like actually him taking the milk out and drinking it from the fridge.
Yep. And the clients had a Ring cam on in their living room. I guess they had a new nanny or something. They had a nanny cam, and that's how they were able to watch their real estate agent make this grievous offense of drinking the milk and putting it back into the fridge.
And out of the container too. Like didn't even get a glass. Not that would make it any better. I'm not justifying it by saying by getting a glass it would be better, but it just seems so it's just rude, out of touch, and just not the smartest move. Like there are so many cameras everywhere now.
And apparently he also sat on the arm of her couch and inadvertently broke it. that was caught on camera too.
It's a tough showing. And I think what was the fine for this offense?
Oh man. So, I mean, this will stop anyone from thinking about taking a drink out of someone's beverage. He was fined over $15,000.
Yeah, really good glass of milk. That's a very expensive glass of milk ultimately. Oh man. Oh, wow. Yeah, and that's where my mind goes with this one is just this concept of being on camera at all times. Yeah. And in most markets, mine included, you have to disclose, not every market, but you do have to disclose if the interior of the home as well as the exterior of the home has video and audio. But a lot of times they don't disclose that, or maybe even the listing agent doesn't ask the question, and the seller just thinks, well, it's my home, so I'm just going to record it. And it's happened multiple times. Actually, this is crazy, but this was last weekend. I was showing a home. Clients were really interested in it, and I saw a camera kind of down in the corner, but it was turned away. Like the camera was facing the wall. It wasn't facing towards us. And it was in the pantry. Yeah, it was in the pantry, and it was like in a dark corner of the pantry. And I just went and looked at it and kind of like tucked my head around it to see if it was on, and it was on. So they weren't videotaping us, but they were definitely recording and listening to our conversation, which then led us to walk out of the house quite quickly. But we were talking about this a little bit off air too, and how a client's like just natural reaction is to tell you their feelings of the home on the way out or on the doorstep. Right. And they're like, well, what should we offer? And I love this home so much, I'd pay way over asking. And of course, like, got to be like 7 out of 10 homes now have a Ring doorbell or some version of one.
I'm always like, stop it, don't say a word.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But I think we should always operate when we're showing homes like we're being recorded, even if it's required by our boards and legislation to disclose that. That doesn't mean it is always disclosed.
Exactly. I would always train people ahead of time. Do not say anything about the price or your thoughts about the home or anything like inflammatory while we're inside, because you never know. They could be recording. Really?
Yeah.
People are shocked by this, but it happens all the time. Totally. And then even derogatory, because I do find that like when I've had sellers and it's been disclosed that it's being recorded, and then the seller will like send me notes after the showing and what some clients say. And there are times, like I remember this one seller, there was a showing that occurred and they said they liked it, but there was a lot of things they didn't like about it and they were really hard on it. The seller said, well, if they write us an offer, we're not going to accept it. And I don't really know what the rules would end up being there, but it was disclosed that it was being recorded. So they would, it would probably stand if the seller said they didn't want to accept that offer. But I know that there's like some fair housing rules that could come into play there too. But it just always operate under the assumption you're being, as agents too. Yeah, it's just so hard to take your emotion out of it as a seller or as a buyer if you're hearing or knowing things. So just assume it's being recorded, say nothing, and talk about it in the car. In the safe place.
In a safe place, exactly. This next one, people may be familiar with it, but I found it just crazy. And it was, I think in 2021, I'm not sure which market it was in, but of course, places were selling like crazy and it was a very, very competitive market. And one of the offers that a seller received on a property is multiple offer situation. One of the offers offered to name the buyer's firstborn child after the seller, if the seller accepted the offer. And it was in the news, so people may be familiar with this, but like the extent that people like this shows that there's probably something going on when it comes to inventory levels, potentially affordability, especially inventory levels, when buyers are going to that extreme to name their child after a seller. And the funniest thing I think of this story was the seller, they didn't get the offer. They didn't win. So maybe they were trying to do that. Yeah. To try to get the price down or something like that, but they didn't win.
Oh, that's so funny. I think I'd prefer an extra 20 grand over another Jessica in the world anyway.
I know, totally. Like as a seller, you're probably like, whatever. You want the money over anything, but like that's a pretty bold move. And you know, if you then end up having the child and you didn't do that, could there be a lawsuit? Like, let's say they didn't name the child Jessica down the road. Could the seller sue them? Probably.
Absolutely.
It's contract. Yeah. I mean, by no way am I a lawyer, but I feel like you're contractually obligated to fulfill your duties.
Oh man.
One final kind of funny one. It's kind of lighthearted, but it could have got us actually into some trouble. Is a client that I had, and he had this young child, and cutest little kid ever. But this kid had this like need, or this like just this desire to whip it out and pee on things. And he would like the nicest little like energetic kid you've ever met, but just needed to whip it out at all moments of a showing. And he would at times like pee out on the boulevard and things like that, and dad would run out there and get after him, and I'd always be like, oh, I'm gonna get in so much crap for this. There's gonna be some time where he's going to pee on a house or do something like that, and this is going to get. So I talked to the dad, of course, but the house that he eventually bought, the kid was out on the deck, and was literally, I looked outside, and he's a younger kid, so you drop the pants like down to your ankles. So he was just, his butt was facing us through the window, and he was peeing all over the deck in the house, just everywhere, just everywhere. And anyways, the good part of this is the guy did end up buying that particular house, but if he didn't, I don't know what would have happened to me and or him, but he was just writing his name or something all over this deck in the house. Hilarious to see. At the time I was like, oh God, there goes my license. But he bought the home, and the sellers were like, it was a completely vacant house. They hadn't been there for a long period of time. So it actually ended up working out just fine. And they were very, very easygoing, but that could have gone another direction really quickly.
That could have gone sideways.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyways, we wanted to share these because I think that we probably all experience these interesting things that we see in real estate. And I think there's some takeaways here. And one of the main ones is, I think, safety. And there's a lot of apps out there that can help with this. I really like your idea though, Jess, of just like bringing somebody else along, or even saying my business partner and using a he, especially if you're a female and you don't feel comfortable with the male who's requesting the showing. I think there's little things that we can do like that they're never, it might take us a little bit more time, but it's never a waste of our time.
It's never a waste. Yeah. And follow your gut always.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
We want to hear though, if anyone has any funny stories, like send them to us, write them in the comments, DM us, email us. Like we want to hear your wild tales from the real estate trenches. Maybe we'll do another episode on this.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe we can do one from other folks. We can bring other folks on, and they can tell their stories too. So yes, definitely let us know if you have any stories that you'd like to share. We'd be more than happy to share those with everybody. Thanks very much for listening. Remember, you can reach out anytime at revrealestateschool.com, and we'll see you in the next lesson.